Hey, how are you today? So I'm going to jump on the back of an existing news story which just came out, which was that unlike some other folks, NAR did not settle the case that they were being sued in, and the jury awarded a $1.8 million in damages settlement against NAR for a bunch of stuff. So we're going to look at that court case very briefly, and then we're going to talk about what it means for listing agents, for buying agents. We're going to talk about what it means for consumers. We're going to talk about the kinds of changes that might happen. So if you stick with me, we'll go through each kind of class and try to figure out exactly what the changes might be downstream, assuming that this court case holds up. But I'm talking about it today because it's probably gonna. So let's see what we got. So first of all, most people don't understand what happened, and it's because it's very technical. It's hard for me, even in the industry, to sort of understand exactly what the arguments were on both sides. Because fundamentally, the people who were doing the suing, they made an argument about a technically correct argument, but actually it doesn't really have anything to do with how the industry works. So they were able to prove that, legally, that there's a problem, and yet I'm not really sure it's the right conclusion. So, but basically, it's tied to the National Association of Realtors policy that requires listing brokers to offer buyer agents compensation in listings on realtor-controlled MLSs. So I'm going to stop right there and say I don't know how it works in other realtor-owned MLSs, but we have a realtor-owned MLS, and yes, we do have to offer buyer agent compensation on the sale of any property, not for rentals, but for sales of property. Of course, that compensation can be $1. Like, we really don't have to offer anything if we don't want to. And I mean, again, 99% of us do. So, but the second piece of this is they argued that that such a policy violates antitrust statutes and inflates costs. So I'm in agreement that I think it does violate antitrust statutes, because it's not, if you're requiring someone to do something, it sort of impedes competition, and if there aren't a lot of other choices around there, then for other people to not do whatever that particular policy is, then that starts to sound and feel like antitrust, and that is definitely the situation today, right? Like, I don't have my pick of MLSs that I can go choose from. My choices are all NAR owned MLSs. Those are my choices. So I don't have any backups there. So the second part, though, is that it inflates costs, and I think that sounds like a very straightforward argument to make, but it turns out that it's probably not correct. I don't think it inflates costs at all, because there is plenty of competition out there in the marketplace. So, just in full disclosure, those who are on my channel already know this, but I'm not an attorney and I'm not an economist. But basically, even though they seem to have won here on the merits of their case, being deeply involved in the real estate industry, it's hard for me to figure out how you're going to squeeze out a lot of costs in real estate. So ultimately, the way that things are done today is the outcome of a very long story, which started all the way back when real estate got started and people started buying and selling real estate back when Massachusetts was founded as a commonwealth, not even a state. And so those laws have been on the books, and they've had to change over the years, but there were some things that just didn't get changed fast enough, and I think that that's how NAR got themselves in this bit of a pickle. So, but moving on, what happens if you're the National Association of Realtors? So I mean, if this holds up, I don't think they've got 1.8 billion lying around. So financially, they're either going to be significantly in debt or just belly up. They're going to be gone. I actually think that probably the easiest solution for them is to sell off their MLSs. Now, their MLSs are huge cash cows, but I think they need to separate the union, the representation piece of it, from how people do their jobs. So I need the MLS to do my job, right? Like, that's pretty obvious. But why should the trade union be in charge of that company? Those things don't make sense to me. It seems to me that what they need to do is start separating them. So now, if they do that, why haven't they done that before? Well, the reason they haven't done it is because membership at the trade union at the National Association of Realtors is very likely to dwindle to maybe 10%. of, over time of where it is today. I mean, the value in being a realtor from a realtor's perspective is the access to the MLS. There's not there's other stuff. They keep telling me that there's other stuff, but we don't really use it. So, I mean, that's sort of the problem, right? So, I don't think NAR can survive in its current form, and I think the changes will be difficult at best and very serious. So, but I think that's where they're at. I think that's what they're looking at. I think that when they start to break apart this case, and if they lose on appeal, this is where they're going to end up. So, if you're a listing agent, okay, we'll just switch gears and say, well, what happens if you're a listing agent? How did this happen? Well, you won't be able to, you won't be required to offer a co-broke fee, right? So theoretically, that means that you'll be able to go out there, and instead of telling a seller that you're going to charge them, for example, say 5%, you'll be able to charge them just 2.5% or 2% or 3% or whatever it is that you negotiate there with the seller, and then not pay out a co-broke fee. Thing is, you could do that today. There's no reason you can't do that today. You just have to tell people you're not going to pay out a fee. And so, why doesn't everybody do that? Well, they don't do it because they know that if we don't offer those fees to buyer agents, then the buyer agents aren't going to come. They're not going to come. They're not going to help you sell your house. And if they do help you sell your house, they're going to want their buyer to get one heck of a deal, for the simple reason that the buyer is going to owe them money. So they're going to want not just 2.5%, but probably a lot more down to go through the hassle of having to turn around and charge their clients. So that's really sort of awkward, you know. And the key here is most listing agents know that it's going to hurt their seller not to off those co-broke fees. It's going to hurt them. It's going to hurt their net. And that's why we offer co-broke fees to begin with. Now, sure, if the market's really good, do we try to pull in the buyer agency fees? Yes, but when the market's really bad, we push out the buyer agency fees. We push them up. We try to get more people interested in the house. Banks oftentimes are selling distressed properties, and they often pay out the largest buyer broker fees because honestly, buying foreclosures from banks is a big pain in the neck. They know that they need to pay more in order to make sure that the bank is going to minimize its losses there. I mean, this is all established economics. I'm not like creating stuff out of whole cloth. If you pay buyer agents more money to sell a house, they will sell the house. They will work harder to sell that house. That's just how it is. So you definitely don't want to be the only guy in town not offering to pay them. That's like a mistake. So the risks to listing agents to not offer co-broke fees is very real, and that's why probably in the short term nothing's really going to change very much. Although I have seen some people trying to think about where this is going and trying to do some changes, but we're going to have to see. I mean, if houses that are worth $800,000 are selling at $750 because they're not paying out a co-broke fee, how long do you think listing agents are going to tell people that that's a good idea? I mean, not very long. Okay, they're going to have evidence that houses that are worth a lot more aren't selling because they're not offering buyer agents money. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious there, and eventually we're going to get our answer once this, if this works out that way, whether or not it's really a good idea. So now, if you're a buyer agent, what happens? What happens if you need to show a house that doesn't offer a co-broke fee? Well, again, buyer agency's been around for well over a decade in its current form. And what do? Best practice here is that you should be working under a contract, a buyer agency agreement that guarantees that you'll get paid. Okay, and if you can take an MLS fee, then you can take it. If you're not paid an MLS fee, like when you're selling a FSBO, then you have to build in your commission. I know a lot of agents that don't sell for sale by owners or sell property that's off market, but I've done quite a bit of that. And you have to have conversations with your buyer that you can't, as much as you would like them to have this house, and it's great that it's perfect for them. At the end of the day, you got kids to feed, and they're going to have to pay. You know what? Most of them are okay with it. If you're good at being a buyer agent, people are happy to pay a reasonable fee for the expertise that you offer. I mean, it's that simple. So, and that's one of the reasons why these buyer agent fees aren't going to go away. Most consumers are happy to have a buyer agent who knows what they're doing in their corner, and they're happy to pay that fee, right? Like, I mean, that's just been my experience. I think for any other experienced buyer agents, I think that would be their experience. So I just don't see the fee going away. So I do think that there will be an increase of the number of buyers that might go out there and try to buy stuff on their own, but we'll talk about them in a minute. So if you're a consumer, if you're a home buyer or seller, I don't think anything's going to change particularly quickly, but I think that there's going to be a lot more choices and a lot more conversations about listing fees and buyer agencies fees and who gets paid what and how they get paid and all that stuff. Now, I will tell you that I have thought the way that it works is terrible. Okay? And I try to do a good job of sort of explaining the system, but I always feel like I've had one hand tied behind my back because I know a lot of the other agents are not explaining it at all. So I am super happy that I think that what this means is that there's going to be more transparency about how things should work and why they work that way. And I think all of that is really, really good news. So I'm pretty excited about that. But in the short term, it's not going to be clear sort of what the best system is for, should sellers decide what to offer? Should buyers simply just negotiate with those buyers directly? It's not really clear how that's going to work. I think that there probably will be an increase in buyers who don't understand that they probably are not prepared to buy a house and they're going to self-represent. They're going to end up tied up in contracts, and most of the buyers will probably break them because buyers on their own, for the most part, can't make heads or tails of a home inspection. Generally, they find that document terrifying and will rip up most deals. So they're going to put deals together and get a home inspection, and then it's going to come apart because they're going to want X, Y, and Z fixed. They're not going to know what the seller's likely to fix or what the seller's not likely to fix. And so but the sellers do. The sellers are still going to have listing agents. So those deals are all going to come apart. I mean, a lot of them, okay? Unless the buyer just, lets the listing agent run all over them, right? And I don't think that that's very good. I mean, if that's what ends up happening, then the buyer's going to realize that they didn't get a very good deal, and that they probably should have gotten an expert to begin with. I mean, they're probably, some of these buyers that go direct, they're going to overpay. I mean, a listing agent could go look right at a buyer and say, "Yeah, I got 6 other offers. What do you want to give me?" Right? Even if they have none. Okay, that's the way the law works. They're able to, determine, what they tell buyers that are unrepresented. And I mean, listen, as a buyer agent, listing agents tell me stuff all the time. Oh, I've got 3 other offers. But because I know what the house is worth, I'm pretty usually able to judge how accurate they're telling me and how much we really need to offer in order to be in the mix. But individual buyers don't have that experience, so I'm not really sure how they're going to do it. I think a lot of them are going to make mistakes, find out after the fact, and then go to the courts. So that's a disaster. And by the way, that entire process, which is, again, likely to happen, just not en masse, it's not going to be everyone, but it's going to be more. That's exactly what the National Association of Realtors defense is in their lawsuit, that if you strip away buyer commissions or allow sellers not to offer buyer commissions, then buyers are simply going to try to buy houses direct, and that's in nobody's best interest. I mean, that's a true statement. The problem is you can't force that system to exist either, right? Like, it's not insurance, okay? It shouldn't be mandatory. It should exist because it's the best situation for everybody, right? Like, it should just work. People don't go to court. People get an attorney when they go to court because it's a smart thing to do. They need someone else's advice with a law degree who's been to court before. It's the same thing with a house. You're going to plunk down $900,000 on a house. You've never bought a house before, right? And that's like, you don't need to talk to anyone about that. I mean, come on. It's insane. And I know that some buyers will do it, and I'm sure some people who are watching this video are like, that's not insane. I could definitely do that. But I'm telling you, from this end of the table, I've seen what buyers want to do and how they try to work their way through a transaction. It's a disaster waiting to happen. It just is. So, and I'm sure some of them will tell themselves, well, I'll get an attorney to handle contracts. I'll have a home inspection, and the appraiser will tell me whether or not I overpaid. But it doesn't really work that way, right? An appraisal is not a guarantee of value. Okay, you really need to do your homework and understand how the market's functioning. Appraisers will tell you what everybody else is paying. That's not the same thing as telling you got a good deal. Okay, they just tell you. Appraisers will validate market inefficiencies. If you go buy new construction in a particular complex that's been in there for a while, and a real estate agent will go in there and figure out that that new construction area is selling 20% above other stuff in town, where it shouldn't, normally it would only be 5 or 6%. It's a bad deal. Okay. But the stuff will continue to appraise because the appraisers will look at recent sales in that new development. And that's all that they look at. So appraisers are not necessarily the answer. Okay. And they can't really help you. They just say, look at the appraisal. That's what it says. Same thing with home inspectors. You can't ask home inspectors what stuff costs. They're prohibited by law from telling you. So who's going to tell them whether something is a big deal, a common deal, not a big deal, right? Like, you need someone to filter the home inspection so that the consumer understands exactly what the condition of the house is relative to the other houses they might be buying. I mean, who's going to do that? So, and again, the attorneys themselves, they know the contracts inside and out. Super helpful when negotiating and running into problems. I try to use the best attorneys I can on every deal. But they don't generally know what the houses are worth, so they can't help you with that, right? Like, they can't tell you whether or not it's a good deal because that's not the business they're in. So, there are problems with that approach. So, bottom line here is that this is a complex, fluid situation, and there aren't going to be a lot of easy answers for anyone. And there's going to be a lot of stuff out there that's probably going to start to happen because of the result of this lawsuit, and some changes are going to come very quickly. So if you want to stay posted, stay on this channel. We'll try to evaluate it as it comes, but change is coming. All right, take care.